I just want to know your deepest, darkest secrets at all times.
That's my favorite too.
Who said getting vulnerable wasn't any fun?
Tell me everything.
Make some noises. Andrea Owen is on Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers.
I was doing vulnerability in terms of a brand before anybody really even knew what that was.
Dropping the judgment. We all judge.
Yeah, we do. So try not to judge. You're judging.
And shedding light on what it truly means to be an open book.
That moment where you are alone with your thoughts can be some of the darkest, scariest moments. But those are the moments that people want to see and people want to hear about to feel like they're less alone.
On an all-new Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers. Welcome to Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers, a podcast dedicated to those seeking a more fulfilled and purposeful life through thought-provoking conversation, spiritual exploration, and authentic connections. The intentional movement has begun, and if you found yourself here, you are a part of it. Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers starts now. Hi, Andrea. Welcome to Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers. I am so excited to talk with you today.
I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Well, usually we kind of jump in into the deep conversations real fast because, that's kind of me. I go deep always.
That's my favorite too.
I feel like I don't know how to chit chat. It's maybe part of that. I don't know why, but it just doesn't come naturally. I just want to know your deepest, darkest secrets at all times. And it's not to share them. It's not to gossip. It's just
Tell me
entertaining.
Everything.
Yes. Let's go there. But with that all said, I actually really want to ask you one question.
Yeah.
Drains. What the hell?
Oh, God. I don't want to talk about it. Yeah. Okay. So many years ago, I learned this is an actual phobia. It's called submechanophobia. And it is the irrational fear of submerged or partially submerged man-made objects. So any kind of machinery, especially sunken ships a little bit, plane crashes in the ocean. Yeah. But it's especially any kind of drain system or mines, underground mines that have the metal stairs and ma'am. And it's there's a whole subreddit about it. And when I found that subreddit, I was like, oh my God, these are my people. But yeah, especially the worst kind of drain. I will not touch the drain in the shower. I straddle it. It makes me really uncomfortable I can if I'm wearing flip flops, it's fine. Even the heaters in our house are those metal grates. Nope. Get out. And that's not even in water. But, the drains at water parks are my absolute worst nightmare. They're so big.
That is so crazy. I mean, I get the submerged planes or ships. I remember as a kid going, snorkeling with the family in Mexico or wherever. And I don't think I could put words to it, why I was scared and why I didn't want to do it, because seeing the animals and the fish was great. But this whole concept of going to explore a sunken ship, in my mind, it's maybe it's the spiritual side of me going no, I know that people died there, then there's ghosts and whatever it was.
Yeah.
I get super freaked out. So I'm I don't want to do that. But then the drain thing is just funny because I've never heard that.
I think there's something about just how big and unpredictable any kind of machinery is on its own. And having it underwater, I feel just maybe adds another element of unpredictability and also that I can't escape. I've tried to unpack it and figure out what it's about, but I'm just glad I'm not the only one. So yeah, that's that.
You felt seen once you found that Reddit.
I did so much.
But I wonder about that because you do talk about taking out the trash and getting vulnerable and sharing all these things and facing our fears so much. And so it's kind of funny that is it. But how do we actually go to face these fears? Because, I know that so much of your work is you've been brought back into these holy shit moments, your life crashing around you. It's almost when I'm reading about you, it's your eat, pray, love moment when you're on the bathroom floor, God, just help me,
Yeah.
You've had a lot of those in your life and you're actually navigating that now with a lot of change. And you've always been vulnerable about it and open about it. But that comes with a sense of fear. So how do we face those fears? How do we allow ourselves to get vulnerable and share what's going on in our lives without oversharing, because I do that. I overshare. And I know that's an anxiety response. I deal with anxiety. And it's finally been pointed out to me that like, I do this, like I word vomit on people sometimes. It's like, I don't need to do that. So there's a fine line between being vulnerable and oversharing. How do you do that? How do you navigate that?
That's a great question. And I'm glad you asked it. And I want to preface my answer by saying, hopefully this makes people feel better. I feel like I, in some ways, was born this way. And I have heard the term seeker. And I do think that I'm one of those people. I was born where at a very young age felt like I could sense and sometimes see the elephant in the room, but nobody was talking about it. Like I'm a Gen Xer, like we are especially a generation that was raised, of course, generally speaking, but mostly raised where you don't talk about the hard stuff. You know, it's like, it's all about how you present and just don't let anyone know your deepest, darkest secrets, and feelings don't solve problems. Just like suck it up, buttercup, and move on, brush yourself off. And I always found that helpful to an extent, but I always wanted to talk about the hard stuff like grief but also terrified of it. It wasn't like I was happy-go-lucky, like wanting to run towards those topics, but always seeking it out. So when I got older and blogging became a thing, I started blogging about some really hard things in my life and was sort of astounded by how many people responded to it. And then I started to get comments from people that I didn't know and just realized, I was doing vulnerability in terms of a brand before anybody really even knew what that was. And so I was an early adopter in there. But to answer your question, I don't think that's for everyone. I do think there's an element of, I'm also an overshare, partly because of anxiety and, untreated ADHD, but also because I feel like it's in my soul. But I don't think it's for everyone to air out all of your stuff on a podcast or a blog or on your Facebook statuses. So, the research shows us that true connection happens when we are vulnerable. True courage happens when we are vulnerable, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. And really, it can be unhealthy to do it to just anyone. So true vulnerability happens when you have created and nurtured a relationship with someone where Brene Brown says that person has earned the right to hear your story. So trust has been established. It may not be perfect, but trust has been established. And hopefully you can also walk into those moments where the other person knows how to show up for you and vice versa. So there's all kinds of nuance within that. I could talk on that for like 30 minutes. So I'm going to stop right there. You jump in. Tell me what you think.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there is a sense of courage to do that and actually go there. But it's even, I find, to be vulnerable with yourself takes courage. I actually was just talking to a client this week who I'm coaching her through the writing process. And I've pushed her to get more vulnerable in her writing because she was just kind of like, oh, this happened and this happened and this happened. And like, they're like these big things. I'm like, well, let's go a little deeper. Let's go a little deeper. And it was really funny when we had our call this week. She said to me, she was literally like cursing my name and wanted to throw in the towel and call me last week and say, I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore. I don't want to write this book because it was opening up so much for her. And she was going back into these places where she thought she had already healed. And like now she was realizing, no, I'm reliving this past, but now this is my chance to rewrite that story. And so when we had our call this week, that mindset shift changed everything. She came in so giddy and she realized, thank you. She started thanking me for taking me there, for allowing me to get vulnerable and find the courage to get vulnerable with myself, to realize I needed to heal these things. And by doing that, I've actually opened myself up to amazing things, and shifts have started happening in her life for the better, like getting her dream house and like this and that, like amazing things that she couldn't see coming. So she had to find that courage to go there to heal that stuff, almost to close those doors to provide space to move forward. And it was just, for me as a coach, was so rewarding to hear this, this arc. But going there, how do you even find the courage to write that and go get that vulnerability with yourself? Because we want to close those doors and we think we've moved past something. I mean, even talking about your first divorce, you wrote about it, on a blog, aired out all this dirty laundry. And I don't think you did it to be look at all how bad this man was and all this stuff. It was more of a, we've talked about that before, the intention of what you're writing. But there is a courage that you have to take to even get vulnerable with yourself, to share these things just privately before we can even go publicly with them.
Yeah, I think for me, the way that I took that first step was realizing, and maybe this was unconscious, but like realizing what was the alternative. The alternative was to keeping it all locked and bottled inside. The alternative was feeling like there was something wrong with me because I wasn't able to heal from it. And I want to say something too. You know, you said the term close the door. I don't know if we ever completely close the door on things, like the things that absolutely annihilate us. You know, massive breakups, divorce, the loss of people that we love, just these things that just decimate our heart in the moment. I believe that we walk away with those, you know, with shrapnel and scar tissue in our hearts, and it can stay with us forever. And it can be our life's journey to learn from it and continue to carry it and decide what we're going to do with it. And that has been incredibly helpful for me, because I'm going to answer your question, but I just wanted to make sure that I pointed that out, because trauma is one of those things that my own trauma, I'm going to spend my life trying to figure out and unpack, and like I am going to hack into this if it kills me. Like what is going on with my brain? But I want to say that just to, in case anybody's feeling like there's something wrong with them, because they feel like they're still carrying it. But to answer your question, I am in agreement with you that it can absolutely start with journaling. And I love the example that you gave, because, you know, for your client, and I've done this too myself, and I've talked to clients about it, who, whether they're either telling me a story or they're writing a story, is they do the kind of just the facts, ma'am, you know, where they just like give you the scaffolding of what happened. And the invitation is to talk about how you were feeling in that moment when you got the phone call where you found out, you know, XYZ happened, when you were laying in your bed at 10:30 at night, when you have plugged your phone in and set it aside, when you go to close your eyes. That moment where you are alone with your thoughts can be some of the darkest, scariest moments of our lives. This is why we drink. This is why we scroll on our phones until 1 or 2 in the morning, until we just simply fall asleep, because it's so hard to be in those moments. But those are the moments that not only are the key to us healing and having insight and moving forward and things like that, but also those are the moments that people want to see and people want to hear about, to feel like they're less alone. Again, I don't think it's always for public consumption, but just, you know, for what it's worth.
I mean, I agree. That's the thing, is we do always put up this facade, and I've talked about it a lot, and I know you talk about it a lot, is this facade that everything's perfect. And I don't know any person that is going through life that has this perfect, all put together life. Yet we all like walk around pretending we do. And I don't know why. I don't know if it's just kind of like,
oh, I know why.
You do? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Why? Why do we do that?
Shame. It's shame. Perfectionism, and whether you fall on the spectrum of like true perfectionism or not, but anytime we are trying to control how we are perceived to other people or to the public or whoever, it is because we're trying to avoid judgment, criticism, failure, and all of those things point to shame. And you know, I got certified in Brene Brown's work around shame resilience in 2014, because what I realized is all of the work that I was helping my clients do felt a little bit like management, you know, like I was managing the symptoms, but I'm like, what is this thing? Like there's some kind of like root cause to this. And then frustratingly, I realized it was shame. And I say frustratingly was because like, I didn't want to go do that work myself, like in my own personal life. But what I realized is that shame is sort of the root cause that, and this is what my second book is all about, like all the behaviors that like, it's the numbing out, it's the isolating instead of asking for support. It's the overachieving, the control, the self-sabotage. It's all shame-based. And no one really wants to talk about it because no one wants to talk about shame. And also people say, well, I don't go around feeling ashamed. And I'm like, honey, I don't either. But when you are participating in those behaviors, you're doing it to try to avoid shame. So shame is actually driving the bus in your life, period.
So we are all walking around for the most part. I mean, because I really think that a majority of people, we are not like being authentic when we're walking around, and we talk about it a lot, like who we are authentically, but then we like like, let's say we want to show up on social media. It's something I'm struggling with right now to show who I truly am. But even when I want to show those authentic moments, I'm still curating them. Maybe it's the producer in me, the television, the years of like trying to make something look so perfect and appeal to everyone. But like, that is so unlikable. That's not even us. That's not who we are. Like, you want to show up authentically so that someone can see the true you and like you, but then we curate it all. And then no one likes that. It's either vanilla or it's just like, that's not real.
It's a tricky balance, especially with social media, and especially if you're a content creator, because you have to think about branding and you have to think about the algorithm and your ideal market and like all this other BS, and it's hard. But yes, I agree with everything you said. It's curated, but I think that like kind of authenticity and vulnerability is also a spectrum, and you have to do whatever. And I don't fault anyone for curating their social media feeds. Like, we're human. We want to come off a certain way. Like, we're all sort of running from shame. Like, I have so much compassion for people. I'm like, I get it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's the best thing that starts to happen when you start to go down the self-development, self-help path, is that you are healing yourself and you're starting to face, things in your life that maybe, were harmful or hurtful or shameful, whatever your full is.
Yeah.
But, I think the best thing about it is it gives us compassion for others. It just opens us up to see everyone else in such a more compassionate light that we can accept one another. And like, I crave now having these moments of authenticity. I don't want to necessarily hear all the horrible things that are happening in your life. I mean, I'm open to, I want to hold the space for that, but it's not like I'm like, I need to hear everything horrible in your life, but like, I have compassion for you knowing that you're going through that. And I think that's the most beautiful thing we can do is, as a self-help, as going through a journey of this, is to really, see ourselves and see our heart in others also.
Yeah.
And that's where I think vulnerability really helps us too.
Yeah, 100%. And I try to accept the notion that everyone is doing the best that they can with the tools that they have at the time. And like, sometimes people's best is shit. It really is. And so when you adopt that sort of mantra or notion that everyone's doing the best they can with what they have, it allows you to set some boundaries if you need to, and also to really have compassion for people and where they're at. If you're judging someone for X, Y, and Z, and then you realize like, well, they are truly doing the best. They don't have a lot of tools, like they were raised blah, blah, blah. It's easier to have compassion for them. And then also, again, sometimes you need to set some boundaries. It's not letting people off the hook for behaving poorly.
Yeah. Yeah. But how do we do that? Because when we start to have compassion, sometimes I also find that we fall into judgment.
Mm-hmm. This is normal.
Like, you don't have those tools. How do we balance compassion and seeing someone else and those judgmental thoughts that come in?
I think it's, first and foremost, I find that once we let go of the idea that we're supposed to not have any judgment, that can help you judge less. It's like, I think the more we beat ourselves up for it, the more we, do the thing that we're judging ourselves for or whatever. So just know that judgment is normal. And I think that where it might need to be sort of, I was going to say regulated. I don't have a better word for it. Like, just, thought about more is trying to really, and I don't expect people to do this all the time. Like, we do not have enough time in the day to put this much thought into everything. But like, say it's a family member or something and you find yourself judging. I'll give you an example. Might be an easier way for me to explain this. So I used to go to 12-step meetings when I was early in sobriety, and there was a particular person in there who had lost custody of their children. And I was so judgmental. Like, as a parent myself, I was like, how does this happen? Like, you have to be some kind of degenerate, to have that happen to you. And so, I stayed in that place for a really long time. And then I decided to have compassion for this person because I realized at the end of the day, what I have accepted is that we're all human. And, in this particular room, this is a specific example, in this particular room, we're all struggling with addiction. And none of us are better than the other. Like, I could absolutely find myself in the same place because I think that's what we do. We're like, I would never. That's like, you know, when we get my friend calls it a case of the better thans. Like, I am better than you because I would never. And but I just started to think like that could happen to me. You know, if the planets aligned and X, Y, and Z happened, that could happen to me. Or I could find myself and end up somewhere equally as what I deem as despicable. So I think it's just thinking about that everyone's human and everyone makes like the most terrible mistakes that we are ashamed of and would swear we would never do. Like, that person didn't wake up that morning and decide, I think today is a good day to lose custody of my children. Like, no, like, it's a progression. So yeah, that's sort of just my thought process.
Well, even you saying that, you know, I can go into judgment. I had a friend that was, you know, trying to gain full custody of her daughter ages and ages ago because her ex was, you know, was dealing with addiction issues and all these things. And like, it was so hard. She couldn't even get full custody. He still got like visitation with other people. Like, he still had his custody arrangement, like as long as someone else was there, like he couldn't. So to me, it's like you're saying, oh, they lost custody. Like, automatically my mind goes to, oh my goodness, they had to do something horrible. You know, my mother-in-law works with CASA, which advocates for young kids and going through a lot of times custody things. And like, to get them in a placement that's healthier for them is actually really hard because the court system like wants to keep people with their parents. So like, the fact that you lose custody, I'm like, wow, you know, that is where my mind goes immediately when you say that. So yeah, we have to walk ourselves back and maybe give ourselves grace in those moments that we are wired to go to the negative regardless. We are wired to go to like, I would never do that. It's part of survival. I was talking to Dr. Rebecca Heiss about this. Like, our brain is just completely wired to go to the negative. It's primal. We can't so give ourselves permission to go there. But then maybe if we just can like catch ourselves and recourse, almost like, you know, I know Gabby Bernstein talks about that. No, I choose a better thought. You know, no, I choose a more loving thought. You know, maybe it's that helps because judgment, like, we all judge.
Yeah, we do. We're going to continue to. The trick is, and this is when I talk about negative self-talk, I give the same lesson. It's just notice when you're doing it. And when you notice, try not to have any judgment about that. So try not to judge your judging. Try not to judge any negative self-talk that you have. Just notice, because you can't, you know, you have to name it to tame it. Just notice that you're doing it. And I have a little mantra where I say like, oh, well, that just happened. I just notice the thought. And sort of like when people are teaching meditation and they say, you know, it's not that you're going to completely eliminate all your thoughts when you're meditating. Maybe some, you know, people who are very seasoned can do that. But it's like the thoughts come in and you just sort of like let them pass like clouds. That's what I do around any kind of thoughts that I don't like, or that I'm wanting to change. I just notice and let them pass. I don't have judgment about myself. And I do my best to try to shift the thought. And rarely do I ever shift the thought into the opposite, like something more positive. I think our BS meters see that, and it makes it more uncomfortable and likely a habit that we won't adopt. So I just notice, say something neutral to myself about it, and move along.
I like that because so often, we'll be like, oh, okay, we're going to change this to a happier or more loving or positive thought. But like, what if we're not in that energy? What if we're not in that space? Like, it's not natural. It's just not natural. And it's like, I kind of fight against this idea that we go to the negative naturally. Like, it's our primal state of being. But it is. So it's just kind of like that neutrality. And I've heard all these different takes on it. I've talked to people from, you know, Limitless Minds about the neutral mindset and how athletes have to keep that like in the moment. And then or, you know, you talk about like if you say something negative out loud, it like 10 times that in your life. And then I brought that up with some psychologists and they're like, no, you have to say it negative because you have to name it to claim it and let it go. So like there's all these different variations. And I think the reality is we have to choose what works best for us.
You do
like
have
it's
to
not
choose
a one size. I don't think our minds are like one size fits all. Like
absolutely
it's
not.
It's
like complex.
It's a complex creature. And even when we go into the world of spirituality, we always talk about leading with our heart and, you know, coming back into who we are. But our mind is a powerful opponent.
It's a powerful drug. Yeah. And I agree with you on all accounts on that. Like, you have to figure out what works for you. And my advice on that is what I've heard a lot with working with women in their negative self-talk. And they'll say, okay, so I had some negative thoughts today and I was beating myself up over dropping the ball on this one particular email. And I told myself, you know, whatever their mantra is that they adopted, say it was the same as mine. Well, that just happened. And then I found myself 5-10 minutes later having more negative thoughts again. And they're looking at me like, what gives, Andrea? And I'm like, babe, this is like learning a new language. Like, you are not going to master this in 5 minutes. You have to keep at it. You have to keep flexing the muscle and working that muscle so that you can you're literally creating new neural pathways in your brain. You're rewiring your brain. So keep at it, keep practicing. And all that to say, like, you have to try different things to see what sticks and works. And you're going to fall off the wagon. You're going to. And so just get back up and keep trying.
So that seems to work for you, that just like a mantra that's like, oh, that just happens. It's more of like an awareness. And then it's just kind of like allowing yourself to shift in the moment. And I like that. I like how you say, like, it's not going to happen overnight. Just not one time is going to change it. Even, you know, I keep bringing up these other conversations, but it's so true. Like, I had another conversation with another, like a meditation teacher that, you know, she had someone come to her after like 30 days, like, well, I don't feel anything. It's not working. And she's like, come back to me in 6 years, come back to me in 10 years. You know, we have to relearn all the stuff that we've learned to where we are now. I'm 41. I'm almost 42. Like, that's a lot of neural pathways that I've like woven into my mind that have to, like, you know, that we need to reverse course on. And so that also comes back to, like, when you were talking about being our best self. I've said that a million times. I hate that term, be your best self. Like, it is one of the things in the self-help spirituality world that I absolutely hate, because to me, it pushes this idea of perfectionism, that there's this perfect you, there's this better you. And like you, I agree. I think we are always doing the best we can in the moment with whatever given circumstances we are dealing with. That could change day to day. That could change hour to hour. Like, we don't know. And so we have to just show up as, I truly believe we are all showing up the best we can in any moment.
Oh, sure. Yeah, with like very few exceptions, but this is why I don't love the subtitles of my books, to be honest, like, because it's a you know, when I don't have a whole lot of control over that, but it's like, live your best life, and, you know, because it's on the bookshelf and it needs to sell and things like that. But I agree with you. I think we're all struggling to some extent at any given moment. And whether that's trying to rework our negative thoughts, whether, you know, we're going through a really treacherous time, whether we've, you know, been diagnosed with a chronic illness or something like that. And it truly is trying your best in whatever goal you have. And I also, just on that same note, I think people sometimes over goal themselves, you know, like just their expectations become so high. And maybe I see this so much because I'm in the self-help space. But, you know, and toxic positivity is a whole, you know, conversation in and of itself. But I think that sometimes, I think especially the pandemic really brought this out in me. I'm like, all right, can we, or maybe it's because I'm getting older and I'm pushing 50. I don't know. But it's just, I'm like, can we just like go for, just lower the bar a little bit? And I know it's not for everyone. I know some people might be listening to this and being like, hell no. And I used to be that person who was like balls to the wall, just gas pedal all the way down. And it was burnout, you know, a year later, or just not reaching my goals and feeling terrible about it. So I think if we all cut ourselves a little bit of slack and gave ourselves some grace, we'd be happier.
Why do you think we do that? Why do you think we just
overgoal
ourselves? Do you think okay, I'm curious about that. Like,
it's the American way.
Do you think it's like a Western American culture? Because I feel 100%. A lot of the stuff that causes us anxiety and depression, all these things are kind of rooted in our culture.
It's culture.
Versus when I talk to people, like in Europe,
100%.
Like I feel like I talk to a ton of people in Europe for some weird reason. I'm like connected over there, like in this space, and like it's such a different way of life, and
it is.
I crave it.
I do too, and I also think this is again something that I've craved more since I've you know, reached middle age, and I absolutely think so much of it comes from our culture in that, and then like, please understand, like there's so much I love about our culture, and I love being an American, and I actually identify as a feminist. And I think one of the travesties of the feminist movement, and feminists have written about this, is that we grew up hearing, you know, as girls, we grew up hearing you can do anything you want. You can be you can have it all. You can be a working mom and, have the career and the kids and the partner and all of these things. And what we grew up thinking we needed to do was literally everything.
Yes.
So we had to do it all, and we had to do it well, and we had to look amazing while doing it, because you can't escape that part of our culture. And I think that a culture rooted in capitalism, like that's going to be a byproduct of just like that go, 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 go hustle culture, productivity as worth, productivity and efficiency as worth. I think it's a recipe for burnout. I think that's why now, our children's generation, I have 2 Gen Z kids, like they're pushing back and saying, no, we don't want a 40-hour a week work week. It's not sustainable long term.
Yeah.
Like all of these things that we just swallowed because we didn't really have any other choice. I think culturally and socially, these generations are pushing back on it. I think we're going to see some changes over the next couple of decades, which I'm glad for them. And I could get on my culture soapbox forever. So please stop me.
No, I think there's also a difference between when you were saying that, like, you can do it all and you have to do it all. Like,
exactly.
I think
in order to be loved.
You can I think we have taken you can have it all and taken it to an extreme. Like, now we have to do it all. And that's not the reality. Like, it is so much different. I'm watching my husband who's starting a company versus me starting a company, like what we go through in our day. And it's not a knock on him. And even when I started the show, I didn't think I was going to be like this raw, feminine, voice. Like I thought it was, I didn't, it's morphed into that. Like, and even saying you're a feminist, like part of me like cringes at this because in my mind, like the feminist side is like, oh, it's, I don't know. There's like a negative connotation in my mind that you have to be I don't know.
Yeah. No, I know what you're saying.
Extreme. Men are bad and women are I actually am very traditional, but I am very pro women. Like, it's like, I have this.
That's feminism. There's so many misconceptions.
That's what I think is like just that term alone gives me all these misconceptions. And I'm like, but when I look at my work and what I do, I'm a feminist.
Yeah, you are. Here's the news. No, and I used to be very anti-feminism as well. And they just have bad branding. Like they did for a long time. And it really is like true feminism is encouraging and cheering for women to do whatever they want. Like if you want to have traditional family role and be a stay-at-home mother and have, the traditional like husband that works, like definitely. And also, from my perspective, like part of feminism is also ensuring that you are safe financially, because I cannot tell you how many women I've known who've been in a marriage for 15, 20 years, haven't worked that whole time, have no idea what's going on with their finances, realize for whatever reason that they need to leave the marriage and can't, or come out completely decimated financially. That to me, like I will die on that hill that is not okay. And so feminism for me is ensuring the safety of women, whether it's their physical safety, their financial safety, their mental and emotional safety at whatever cost and allowing them to do whatever they want for a living, whether it's sex work, whether it's, making sure they're safe, whether it's being a stay-at-home mom, whether it's being a working woman with no children and being child-free and that she's not judged for that. Like, do what you want. Like, be allowed to do what you want without judgment. The end.
Yeah. No. And I mean, in that way, I guess I am a feminist. And I guess in general, I just want freedom across the board. I think that is my biggest issue. It's like, we are all here to have our own experience. Excuse me. We are all here to have our own experience. We are all going to go about life differently. We all want to experience different things. Like, let's get out of each other's way and just allow ourselves to be. Stop the judgment. Stop pushing our viewpoints on people. Like, just allow. And I know it sounds like very Pollyannish, like, just love each other in the process, like just hold the space for us all to live. There's room for us all. There's room for us all.
And there's room for conversation too, as well. And, I've gone from both ends of the kind of political lines throughout my life. And I feel like I have an interesting take on it because I've voted sort of all over the place, and I understand the perspective of others. And if there's one thing I can't stand, it's when like people just like won't even listen to somebody else's viewpoint.
Yes.
Like during the 2016 election, my son was 9, and he knew that I voted one way, and he was really into it and excited. And I was like, I need you to understand why people are voting for the other person. And I explained it to him, and he stopped for a minute, and he goes, "Oh, well, that makes a lot of sense." And it was kind of hard for me to do because, like, of course I want my child to have the same values that I have. Yeah. But at the end of the day, like, I want him to come to his own conclusions and like what's important to him. Like, what are his values? Like, what's his thought process after he hears everything he possibly can. So that's just, going off on parenting there a little bit. I know we've kind of like switched subjects here.
No, but you're even like tapping into something that I have been so afraid to talk about on this show because I don't want to pigeonhole myself into any idea or piss anyone off because it is so polarizing.
Tricky.
Politics. I love talking about politics. I've been into politics my whole life. I worked in Hollywood where it was a very big deal. And one of the things that drove me absolutely crazy is the single-minded aspect of it, that we push one narrative no matter what. And we have to, as a whole, as a society, look at the source of where the stuff is coming from. We need to allow people to have opinions. We need to allow people to have a conversation. I worked on this test show one summer when the show I was working on was on hiatus. And it was, it actually never went anywhere, but there were like these 4 preachers. And I'm like, this is going to be interesting. And they come from different like religious backgrounds and different walks of life. And so to me, I'm like, ooh, this is going to be really great. But they were like, I think they were 4 Black men and 4 Black preachers. And then one of their guests was like, I think it was Ann Coulter. I'm like, oh, great.
Oh my gosh.
This is going to be a great show. Like, I'm like bringing out my popcorn. Can't wait to like start working on it. How am I going to promote this thing?
This is going to be epic.
This is going to be epic. And literally, it was the most vanilla, boring show I've ever seen. Like, they just sat there. Like, I was just like, we are like primed for such a good conversation. Let's have it. And that's one thing another show I was working on, they had Killer Mike on. And I absolutely love that man. Not political views, anything. I'm not going to get political about it. I love the fact that he came on and was like, I want to have the conversation. I want to hear what every side has to say. And I think we need to be more open in our opinions and stop being so polarized. And that just goes to everything in life, that we just are so single-minded. We set our mind into whatever conversation or opinion we have, and there's not room for other people to grow. We can learn a lot by just listening.
Absolutely. I absolutely think that we can. And, even now my son is 16 and he's, into YouTube and, he'll tell me about a new YouTuber that he's been watching and he'll consume like hours of like a single YouTuber. And the thing I'm most interested in is, where is this person getting their information? Like,
yes.
Like, are they just regurgitating something they heard? And my encouragement to him is like to question everything that you hear, like on social media and YouTube and things like that. And even a lot of, journalism and those types of things. But I agree with you on all that. Yeah. Let's just listen and listen to actually understand instead of listen to respond. And this goes whether you're having a political conversation, a conversation with your partner, coworker, child, anybody. That's one of the things that I'm grateful for in my coaching training is the ability to listen to understand and also be comfortable in the pause that happens when that person is done talking, because you're then formulating your response. There's just like that discomfort, like you don't have to fill the space so immediately. It's uncomfortable, but it's one thing I'm grateful for, because it's really hard to listen to someone when you're formulating a response in your head.
It's the power of the pause. That's even as a writer. I mean, you know about that. The power of the pause. It is one of the biggest things we can do in our life, in anything we're doing.
100%. Yep.
Yeah. But even, I love how you're talking about like, where are we getting our information from? Where is it coming from? As a journalism school graduate, it was definitely one of those things. It's like they teach you. I think journalism, even going back to our culture conversation, journalism here has taken a turn. Journalism isn't journalism so much. I'm not saying not all journalism.
Yeah.
It's propaganda.
I think a lot of it is propaganda.
It's propaganda, it's opinion, and it's entertainment. It's all money driven. And so once we start to follow the money, we can start to understand what we're really. And so, yeah, we could say, oh, we watch the news and we're very informed, but are you?
Are you?
I actually dated someone a long time ago that was like, would only read overseas news about America because it was kind of like, I think it was like Al Jazeera or something he would read. I don't know. But his opinion was like, they're less like, let's have stake in the game here so I can get more facts versus like all emotions, the opinion that's out there. Yeah. And we get so hyped up in it. So I love being able to like listen to every viewpoint, take that pause, formulate it, and then like come to the table with how you feel, how it resonates with you.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think just so much of you're right on all accounts. Like there's so much of it is sensationalized and trying to get the viewer or reader emotional so that they will click, so that they will get more, ad revenue, download revenue, whatever it is. Because it's all money driven, sadly. Because America.
Because America. So how do we change that? How do we change the narrative in America to start making people see one another as people?
Oh God, that I have no idea. I can answer so many other questions, but I honestly have no idea. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Your guess is as
how do we show
mine.
up? How do we show up ourselves like that and not promote ourselves as commodities?
On social media, I don't even know if that's possible to you're going to have some like a slightness to it. I'm working with a company right now, a big company that everyone knows who they are, with their employees. And several of their employees have mentioned that part of the company's, I don't know if it's a company value or it's just like part of sort of like the pillars of the company, is to have your own personal brand. So, and like how they show up on LinkedIn and how they're showing up, even just like at networking events and like within their emails to colleagues and things like that. And I'm like, dang, like even within a company, they want you to have a personal brand. Like this is wild to me that, my children are going to grow up like this, that even before they can drive, that they have an internet footprint and this personal brand. So my short answer is like, I don't know. I don't think it's possible in this day and age, unless you go completely off grid and don't use the internet, or like, especially don't have any social media platforms. I think you're going to be some kind of commodity. But I think that one of the sort of remedies for that is to nurture real life relationships. And that comes with building trust over time, having empathy, having compassion, having real conversations, asking people how they really are in certain moments instead of just the facts like we talked about. Those types of things, having, cleaning up messes where you make them. That's a big value that I've taught my children. And I don't just mean like, spilling the milk. I mean, like if they make a mess with another person, like hurt them, insult them, whatever it is, clean that mess up and make amends. Like those types of things are the things that are going to build real, authentic connections with each other. But
what's interesting is that those real life connections are few and far between, especially with your children's generation. My children are even younger. Like they don't even know. They don't know how to have real life connections because they have grown up in an age of computers, social media. Yeah. They've weathered a pandemic as a child during very formative years where that real life connection isn't actually real. I was talking to a human connection specialist and talking about the fact that we are in a loneliness epidemic 100%. Because we do not know how to connect. At least you and I grew up in a time before social media, before cell phones, before, I still remember doing reports on like my grandparents, like word processor typing, it's like, remember those loud printers? Yeah. Yes. I was talking about it the other day, my girlfriend, she had one of the very first printers growing up and her dad worked for like, I don't forget Prodigy, some early tech company. And it had like those where you rip the sides off. You had to rip off the edges, they must have been so annoyed with us. Like all we would ever do is make these big long banners and leave all that stuff around the house. But like we grew up in those times. Like we remember when that happened. Our kids don't know that. All they know is the connection on their computer, on their phone. And so like, how do we model the behavior so that they can grow up understanding what real connections are and understanding that there's more to life than their technological footprint, their image that they put out on social media, because that's not real.
Yeah, I think more than modeling, it's about having conversations with them about it and asking them, maybe, asking them how they feel about it, like what we were just talking about. I think it'd be tricky for them because they don't know any other world besides that.
Yeah.
But just talking to them about what it means and looks like to be a real friend, which is hard enough, like even without the internet. I mean, like I didn't know what it meant to be a real friend until I was in my 30s, and had screwed up so many things and made so many mistakes that I had to clean up. But I wonder, and this is just sort of me musing, like I wonder if we're going to see everything kind of correct itself and maybe the pendulum swings the other way. I don't know how that's possible with technology, but I wonder if Generation Z, Generation Alpha especially, are going to grow up and truly as a whole, and of course I'm speaking generally here, but understand the detriment that technology has done to them as humans and within their human connections. And there's going to be a push towards, less phones, less social media. I don't know. We have to wait and see. I have no idea. And I'm definitely not somebody who can analyze and predict trends like that. But and maybe it's just the hope that I always have because, we're seeing suicide rates at an all-time high, and it's so much of it is due to loneliness and this lack of connection that we have. And I'm hopeful that there's going to be a way that we find our way back to each other as humans.
Yeah. I'm just thinking it's like there has to be something that changes because there's so many good things that do come out of it. And so hopefully that we can start to find that balance because there's great ways. Like, look at us. We get to connect. We wouldn't have crossed paths if it wasn't for technology.
Right.
So there's so many good things that can happen. It's just how we're implementing it. And I think I'm with you. I hope the pendulum swings because it's real. We don't know how to communicate offline.
Yeah. I mean, not to mention the fact that, kids these days, I hate it when those three words come out of my mouth. Kids these days don't know a life. Because remember after school for us, you would go home and you can go in your room and not have to deal with the pressure of friends and showing up and answering things like that. And now the kids don't. They're on pressure. They have pressure pretty much 24/7 to respond. Someone is able to get a hold of them and tug on their sleeve all the time. Like, I can't imagine the stress that that's doing to these kids' brains and bodies. And so, yeah, I'm hopeful with you that things are going to change and there's going to be some kind of boundaries put in place, but who knows?
Yeah. I mean, it just, I'm thinking about it even when you were saying that. I remember for my 13th birthday, my mom got me my own landline in my room. And she gave me.
Did you have your own phone number too?
Yeah, she gave me a little calling card. Yeah, my own phone number so I can hand it out to people. And I've never been a phone talker. It's really weird because now I'm doing this for a living. But I've never been a big talker in that way of being on the phone. And so I didn't want to give it out to anyone. I never used it. I think my sister hijacked it at some point. I'm like, okay, you can have it. I didn't care. But kids can't get away from it. And I'm just so thankful. I'm so thankful that we didn't have to go through making all those mistakes that you make in your adolescence and your college life and your high school life and have it all documented. What a horrible thing. So I feel bad for kids to have to go through that. It's
hard. It's nearly impossible, I think, to navigate and keep any of your self-esteem and self-worth intact. I think that's why it's even more important just to have conversations with them.
So good. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I love having this conversation. How can we work with you? Where can we get your books? I know you have multiple books and you have an amazing podcast. Where do we listen? I'm sure it's everywhere, but
the books are everywhere. Books are sold, obviously on Amazon. And my podcast is called Make Some Noise. And you can find me at AndreaOwen.com.
I love it. Thank you so much for joining me today. I love having a conversation with you.
Same. Thanks everybody for being here. I'm always grateful for listeners' time. So thank you, everybody.
And that's it for today's Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers. Thank you so much for listening. And thank you, Andrea Owen, for joining me in such a fun conversation all about the fear of drains, connecting, being a feminist, and so much more. If you want to work with Andrea, get any of her books, or listen to her podcast, I'll put all the information in the show notes below. And as always, you can find Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers and Intentional Media on our website at CourtneyMyers.com. That's where you'll find our books, courses, and everything else we have going on. Come visit us. I'll see you soon. Bye.